It's relative isolation.
You know, the beach has always been kind of different.
We have the best of both worlds. There's stuff to do because of the tourist industry. They bring in stuff that the locals can kind of take advantage of all year round, I think. And plus, it's just a gorgeous place.
You can see it. He begins his focusing.
I was born and raised in the village of Avon, and didn't have any power, and there was no road except you could drive the ocean at low water.
He has seen, even dream.
We have the most beautiful sunset
Now
in
he's
the
finished
world.
focusing, imagining lightning strike.
It is a special place because I've known it all my life and I've always been so close to it.
From here, look who's laughing now that you've wasted how many years and you've barely even tasted anything remotely close to everything you've boasted about. Look who's crying now.
A fella asked me one time, he says, well, what was there when you first come here? I said, it wasn't much there, but I said they had a Methodist church.
But I can remember a lot of stories that my dad used to tell me, and he dates back to the early 20s as far as his family coming down here. And this was before there was a bridge coming onto the Outer Banks. They would come down by boat, and his family was in the timber business, timber and sawmill business, and they had a big ferry-type tugboat called the Hattie Creek. And they used to come down, leave Elizabeth City early morning, and make the 2.5 to 3 hour trip down here by boat. And they would bring a couple of horses and a cart along with them. And they would dock at Old Nag's Head dock, Old Nag's Head Landing, which was one of the few developments down here at the time, and unload the horses and load everything on the cart and take the approximately 1 mile trip by cart over to the beach, and they would spend the day on the beach. And of course, this is before there was any development on the ocean side. And as the years went by, my dad's father, my grandfather, actually bought some property on the ocean front and built one of the first cottages, or probably the first cottage in Nag's Head that was ever built on the ocean front down here, and that was in the late 20s. And his cottage was sitting right on the ocean, and they would still come down by boat to enjoy that cottage during their days, during the summer days. And I can remember my dad saying that he could sit on the porch of that cottage and look in either direction, north or south, east or west, and couldn't see any other building. The people that came to the Outer Banks when I was a young boy, 50s and 60s, there weren't that many of them. So it was relatively isolated, and that meant it was really special.
I was born in Virginia, but I moved to Duck when I was 3. I grew up there. We didn't have a paved road in the beginning. We didn't have electricity in the beginning. There was a grocery store, no post office. The mail came from Kitty Hawk. And before I started school, I moved to Corolla, and I started school at Corolla in the one-room schoolhouse. It's still there. There was 2 people in the first grade. I don't know about the other grades. There was a man school teacher. I don't know what his name was.
I would imagine there was only about 4 or 5 families in Corolla when I was there. Now, when I went there was a schoolhouse there, but at that time I think they went over on the mainland and went to school then.
My grandparents had a motel. Actually, the hotel they owned, it was called Sierra Court in Quizzo. And immediately beside it was a little amusement park called Funland Park that my aunt owned. And I remember my grandmother was always very proud because Sierra Court was the first
motel on the Outer Banks that had private toilets in each room and a shower. But I used to go up on this sun deck that she had there and look west, and there was nothing. There was no bypass, there were no side streets, there were no businesses there. When you came off of the beach road immediately adjacent to the ocean and looked westward, all you saw were these scrub pines and live oaks and sand dunes and just nothing.
We boys growing up, in the summertime, we had a good thing going, didn't know it. We had swimming into the ocean, we had swimming into the Sound. The Sound was just as clear as it could be, Pamlico Sound was.
When we were young, when I was young growing up down here, my family used to spend all of their summers down here. We came down from Elizabeth City, and at that time, the only development down here was right on the beach road, and most of that development was on the ocean side, the east side. There was no bypass, there was no development much on the west side of the road except just a few stores and a few shops. Most all the cottages were on the ocean side. So we used to come down for the entire summer, and being only 3 grocery stores down here, which didn't really carry a whole lot of fresh meat, we actually remember our families bringing live chickens down, and the maids would have to head the chickens and cut up the chickens for us to have fresh meat. And of course we ate a lot of seafood, a lot of fish, and shrimp and crabs that we caught ourselves.
You knew everyone. Whenever I did something wrong, my biggest concern was it was going to get back to my grandmother. Donnie Twine was the chief of police, and he knew me. He knew my grandmother. The people that were down here, pretty much everyone from one end of the beach to the other knew one another.
Well, when I first came down here as a young man, I was assigned to the Captain's Inlet Coast Guard Station, which was just approximately 3 miles north of Duck, the village of Duck. And the primary thing for the station was watching out for small boats and ships. And also, we were assigned to take care of the Currituck Beach Lighthouse. This station was 12 miles from Captain's Inlet Coast Guard Station, and it was automated. They put generators there and a bank of 110 volt bank of batteries. So twice a week, we had to travel up to Corolla to charge the batteries at this light station. Now you had 2 choices in going up to the lighthouse from Captain's Inlet Station. One was you left there was no highway. They had what they called a pole road. Now the pole road was telephone poles all up and down the beach. And they had strands of copper wire run through it. That was the way you communicated. We drove that, what they call a pole road, when you could not drive over onto the ocean side when it was low water. The pole road was not a good road. It was soft, but we had 4-wheel drive and we made it up and back, pretty well. But if the tide was low on the ocean side, then we would go over to the ocean side and drive what we call the surf all the way there, and a lot less time to get there. But coming back, you had to drive the pole road because the tide changes on you while you was there. So it was quite an experience. Getting up there and getting out of there.
I didn't have any street lights. We had to have 4-wheel drive vehicles to go over to the beach. to go back and forth to Corolla. Had to go up the pole road, whatever that was, where the telephone poles were. That's how we went to Corolla.
There was, of course, no bypass back then. The bypass was actually built around 1960 or 61. And once that was built, all the development really blossomed from there.
The biggest change, single change that I can think of is the building of the bypass. When I was a young boy and we would come down here, you came over a wooden bridge, a completely wooden bridge, the Currituck Sound Bridge, that it was built out of, I would say it was built out of 4x8s, the planks going across the bottom, and then they put tar over top of it. As a matter of fact, my dad remembers when he was a kid, when the tar wasn't there and you rode over the 4x8s and you looked down and you saw the sound. Now we've got a large 4-lane concrete bridge, and that's a big change. But at any rate, when you hit the Outer Banks, there was no bypass, and it was a big curve, and you were coming, headed due east, and then it curved into 158, which is what we now call the Beach Road, because there was no bypass. And the only things that were at that area right now, at that time, there was a Journey's Inn Motel, and there was Anderson's Supermarket, and there was Kitty Hawk Pier. And then when you went by them, there were a couple of little small cottages. As a matter of fact, my family used to stay in one of those cottages called the Perkins Cottage. And that's all there was in that area. That was the business district, those three things. There are probably, 40 businesses now that are right there at that intersection.
But I definitely do see the growth, and I think it's going to keep on.
We would go down occasionally in the winter to go visit my grandparents, and it was a very eerie feeling when you hit the Outer Banks because there were no lights. So in that 12-mile run, you probably went by, and at this time of the year, you probably go by maybe 20 structures that had lights on. I'm going to say that tonight when we came down that same path, I probably went by 800 structures that had lights on, I guess.
Another thing too is now there's no place for the people who work and live here to live. There's so many houses that they're building for, big families to come stay, or like 10 families to all come stay together. I don't know why you'd want to do that, but
exactly. Who wants
do.
to go on vacation with like 25 of their
I don't know 30
members?
people that I could stay in a house with
Me
for a week
neither.
and not and have
I'd
a
want to
good
go
time.
with like 2 people.
Yeah.
Where we traveled, we were going up there, there was nothing. Nothing. Now it's all built up, and it's built up with very large homes. I guess they were built for rental purposes.
So in Baltimore, the new cool place to go is Corolla.
Yep,
Get a big
Corolla and
house.
Duck.
Everyone goes to Corolla and Duck, gets a big house, stays like 50 people, and has a horrible time because they all don't get along.
Yep.
They don't have any money
Because
to do anything. Getting a big house. And
And I feel like the big houses take away from restaurant business too, because then people are just going to go to the grocery store and buy food.
The hotels were mostly sort of wooden structures with shingles. There was the Croatan, part of which is still there, the Hotel Parkinson, which is now gone. It's a beautiful cedar-shaped big house. There was the Hotel Nag's Header, which I used to lifeguard there, and it was a white 3-story building that was probably about 150 feet long with a veranda that went all the way around the perimeter. Really neat old Nag's Head type hotel. That is gone, and where it was, there are now about 8 or 10 cottages, these big box cottages that have been built there.
They're tearing down all these old houses that that look like beach houses, what I think of as at the Outer Banks, and they're putting in these houses that could be like any beach anywhere. Like they look like Florida houses or something. They just have like grass lawns, and it's just so fake, like fake palm trees and stuff.
Silly looking.
And when they come down here, they act so foolish, and they want to pile everything all the houses one on top of another.
And big, ugly houses that all
Or
look the same
drugstores.
are being put up.
Yeah, and wings
drugstores
is
and
taking
wings
over the
and-
world here on the Outer Banks.
It's like a virus.
And it seems like now there are more wings or whatever they're called them, just at one branch of stores than the total number of stores that used to be on the beach. And it often saddens me right up and down the beach and see all of the businesses and the glaring lights.
All these chains are opening up. We have Outback now
Sonic.
and Hooters.
But it is kind of a shame that people that go
Yeah.
on vacation would go to these places
Yeah, you
when
wanna
there's
get
so
away
many
from that.
restaurants in this area that are unique.
I mean, it was due to happen with the population. I mean, the whole Home Depot thing, I thought that was kind of a bigger step than I expected, but with the population growth, I mean, it's needed. I don't know about 12 drugstores.
It's not like there's all this land, so they're tearing down. Anything new that comes in is like in place of something that was there before.
Yeah.
So it's always like really sad.
In the past 2.5 years, there have been 15 small motels similar to mine that we've lost down here to development. And what's happening, the property is getting so valuable and much more valuable in relationship to the business. You have a small business sitting on a very valuable piece of property, and the lure, it's very tempting to sell the property, tear down the business, the motel, whatever business is sitting on it, and then redevelop the property. And that has happened to at least 15 or 16 small motels down here. So we're losing our little mom and pop type motels pretty rapidly.
The point in time when I began to say, man, property is really valuable on the beach is when it reached what they call $1,000 a front foot. So for every foot of oceanfront, you measured the lot by its width. For every foot of oceanfront, it was $1,000. Just people couldn't believe it. It was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable because, for example, my grandfather on the other side of my family, not the one that ran Sierra Court, but my Jackson grandfather, he traded I think it was a 100-foot lot in Kitty Hawk, oceanfront lot, and he traded it for a soda fountain.
Before the bypass was built back in the 40s, maybe dating back to the late 20s and 30s when my dad was down here, property, which is now the bypass property, and those lots are selling up in the $1 million range. Those lots back in the late 20s and early 30s were around $50 to $100. So the bypass really changed the complexion of the entire beach. At that point, things really began to be developed and commercialized, and property values increased substantially, and things really rolled from there. Some people think in a positive way, but a lot of the old timers think that it was sort of a negative impact, but I guess you chalk that up to progress, and progress works for a lot of people. I guess is something that we have to contend with. It's not always a good thing.
Well, it is our beach, and we local people are nice people. We don't have to worry about locking our doors, and many nights I sleep with my doors unlocked. And it's getting so that that's not going to be able to happen much longer.
But still, it still has sort of a family tenor to it, that mostly what Nag's Head has been and continues to be is a family resort, and I think that's pretty special.
Touches roots to expose them. Quicksand steals my shoes. Clouds bring the F-stop blues. Look who's laughing now that you've wasted how many years, and you've barely even tasted